Welcome everyone to today's webinar, 2023 Restaurant Regulation Updates, presented by Kevin Dugan with the New York State Restaurant Association. Many thanks to our presenter, Kevin, for being with us today, and to all the participants who have joined in. Please note this webinar is being recorded to share what we learn with the business community. All attendees will receive the link to the recording. Kevin will share the presentation with you, then follow with time for questions and discussion. Please use the chat to submit any questions during the presentation. Just a reminder, when others are speaking, please keep your audio on mute to minimize background noise. With that said, I'll turn it over to Kevin to start things off.
Hey everybody, I hope everybody's doing well. Yeah, thanks for that introduction. My name is Kevin Dugan. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the New York State Restaurant Association. Have been doing this for about 7 or so years, so pretty well versed in the industry. And yeah, here to give a kind of an update about what we can expect for 2023. Before we get started in the presentation, it's sort of an interesting day to be doing this. For those who don't know, the state of the state is today. The governor will be giving her address, laying out more or less what she wants to accomplish in the first half of the legislative session, kind of before budget, kind of from up until now until the budget. We'll get a better idea of some of the specifics during that speech. From what the folks I've talked to so far, I don't think we're going to learn a heck of a lot, but we can get into some of that stuff as we go here. So hang on, give me 1 second here while I share my screen. Where is hang on 1 second here. Why isn't this working here? Oh, that's not it. That's not it. Let's do it this way then. Can folks see that? Good.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's start the slideshow here. Went through some of the reminders. So let's start sort of holistically here. Let's zoom out. So where are we politically? It's an interesting environment. So coming off what could only be described as sort of a weird election year. I don't have to sort of tell you folks, but the governor's race was much sort of closer than anybody anticipated. And what does that mean politically? So I would say the governor is probably in the weakest position we've seen in my tenure. I would say, coming from where Governor Cuomo was, who always sort of had a strong mandate whenever he ran for the reelection, he always won by huge margins, and always had sort of forced the rest of the Democrats to sort of fall in line behind him. This year, with the Governor Hochul winning her election by a very slim margin, comparatively speaking, to what we've seen in the past, she doesn't have that same sort of mandate. She doesn't sort of have that same sort of, I would say, momentum or support that Governor Cuomo did in his reign. So now we have a sort of a weak governor, and now we sort of see more strength in the state legislatures. We have some leaders who have been around a little bit more. Andrea Stewart-Cousins has been Senate Majority Leader now for a while. Speaker of the Assembly, Carl Hastie, has been Speaker now for a while. So again, we have these sort of entrenched leaders in both legislative houses, and a brand new governor, more or less, with coming off an election where she didn't win by much. So again, I think that we're going to see a lot more willingness from the legislature to sort of maybe go against what the governor has sort of wanted. And we can sort of see that already. And we don't need to go back very far to see how this relationship could potentially be fraught. This relationship could be sort of interesting in that regard. The governor has had a seat to fill on the New York State Supreme Court, and she has put forth a nominee that is not very well liked. He's sort of a Latino gentleman who leans more on the conservative side of things, which has not gone over well with the state legislature, the Senate in particular. And there's been a lot of already senators who have come out and more or less said, like, we're not voting for Judge LaSalle, and you're going to need to find somebody else. That would be a pretty big loss for Governor Hochul if her first sort of New York State Supreme Court nominee doesn't get certified, when she has theoretically both houses are in her party and should support her decision. Organized labor has come out against LaSalle, which again is a huge sort of hit, and it's going to be an uphill climb just to get this nominee confirmed, which again most of the time happens in New York State without much hustle or hubbub or whatever you want to call it. It's not like the federal level where you have all these hearings and it takes a long time to get through Congress for these appointments. Usually in the state, it usually goes pretty much smooth sailing, not so much with this particular nomination. So again, if she were to lose that and be forced to come off that nomination and find somebody else, that's going to divide them even further, the governor and the two houses in the legislature. Again, already pretty frosty relationship. Again, maybe set to get even worse depending on how this Supreme Court nominee goes. That would be, again, something to certainly watch, and again, could see a significant divide. Now, practically speaking, what does that mean? Maybe not so much, maybe not too much, because again, we have both houses have veto-proof majorities. What does that mean? Both houses can override a governor's veto. So if they pass a bill, the governor decides to veto it. Both houses have the votes if everybody votes on party lines to overturn said veto. So again, the governor's at a pretty significant disadvantage in that case, sort of wielding any sort of authority, just because again both houses have that veto-proof majority and can basically override any decision she wants to make. But again, the executive power has a lot of weight outside of just strict legislative issues and can do a lot of things through agencies and things like that. So again, not ideal for that to be sort of that divided of relationship. You sort of for the ease of government, you want everybody to sort of be in lockstep, but that is certainly not the case. So it could be a very strange year. It could be a very strange legislative year. Now, that is going to sort of color the rest of this conversation we're going to have today. And we'll start off, I guess, with probably the big issue that folks are concerned about, and something that I certainly expect to see in 2023. And the top line issue is minimum wage. Now, we just saw a minimum wage increase happen at the end of this year, and we're as upstate New York starts to increase their wage to get to the $15 mark that the rest of the state has, I would anticipate very much that the legislature moves this year to increase the minimum wage again. Both houses have introduced bills to do so. The numbers as laid out in the original bill, again, I want to hasten this by saying, like, this is the first step in a negotiation. A lot of stuff is going to change. This is the first step that the Democrats have put forth in both the Assembly and the Senate, which is a minimum wage increase for upstate New York would get to $20 an hour, I believe, in 2027. So that's 4 years from now, a pretty significant increase from where we are. Again, $15 next year in upstate New York. Again, increasing to in 2027 to $20 an hour. That is a very significant increase. Again, before people start, having the fear of God put into them, I would just again say this is the first step in the negotiation process. I don't know if it's going to end up where they want it to, but then that is sort of the first salvo sent from both the House and the Senate. Both current iterations of the minimum wage increase both keep the tip credit intact at 2/3 of the minimum wage. So again, it would go up as the minimum wage goes up, but the tip credit would remain intact, which is something that we're gonna that's going to come up for conversation separately on the minimum wage increase. Those advocates who would want to eliminate the tip credit have already started making noise that they would like to see that happen in any sort of minimum wage increase bill. Again, hasn't been included at this point. Again, but I would like to, again, just emphasize the fact that this is the first step in a multi-month negotiation process. The governor has not sort of laid out anything about the minimum wage increase. She has not mentioned it at all in any of the press she sort of has done up to this point. That this is the one issue I would keep an ear out for during the State of the State. Wouldn't be surprised if she mentioned the minimum wage, but again, she sort of has thrown some cold water on the fact that is there a need for it at this point. She's very concerned and has voiced these concerns on multiple occasions, I should say, the effect that would have on small business, what small business is like in the state of New York, and the fact that we need to keep small businesses healthy because she sees everybody fleeing the state. We have lowest population we've had in quite a while, and how do you keep New Yorkers in New York? One of the ways to do that is provide good jobs, but again, you need to have small businesses to provide said jobs. So again, we'll see exactly where that lands, but we'll see if she has anything to say today. Again, that will be a big indication about if this is one of her priorities or not. Speaker Hasty yesterday did say in his sort of acceptance of being reelected speaker that he's going to be pushing for a minimum wage increase this year. And we know the Senate, Jessica Ramos, who's a labor chair in the Senate, has voiced her support for that issue, that there needs to be another minimum wage increase. So again, I think both legislative houses are pretty dead set on it. They sort of have to be. I mean, when both houses came back in December and voted themselves a raise. So again, it's one of those, optically speaking, can you vote yourself a raise and then not increase the minimum wage? It sort of feels like those two things are sort of related. So again, we'll see what happens as we get going here, and if Hochul mentions it today during her State of the State address. But again, it's going to be a priority, I think, for both legislative houses to see some sort of minimum wage increase. And the other thing to take kind of with that is, the economic climate overall. Obviously, in our industry, in the restaurant industry, unemployment still, I shouldn't say unemployment, but getting people to fill jobs is sort of a huge problem. We still can't find enough people to work. We can't find enough people to fill the spots we already have open. So how do you get more people back into the workforce? That's going to be a big talking point, I think, of the governor's State of the State address, and also something that she's going to be emphasizing, throughout, the fact that we need to get more folks back in the workforce. It's not just the restaurant industry. We are at a huge deficit here, but we're not the only industry struggling to find folks to work. A lot of different industries are, and that is a huge problem the governor is going to have to tackle, and what that looks like. We're at the lowest unemployment level, I believe. This is federally speaking, that we've been at in modern times, more or less. And what impact does that have on the business community, and what can the state do to help mitigate some of these issues that we're having? I know that they're training and sort of getting more folks into all industries from at a younger age is going to be a huge sort of talking point for this administration. We've already been approached about how we can structure possibly more trainings for those folks looking to get into the hospitality industry, what that would look like starting from a younger age. And again, so I think that whole idea about jobs, getting folks into these industries at a younger age, making sure that there's ability for advancement is going to be a huge sort of talking point for this administration. So again, would expect to hear some of that stuff today, probably via some tax credit programs, things like that we've seen in the past, that again, to try to help spur to get folks back into the sort of job marketplace, so to speak. So that's sort of the big look at the wage issues. The other thing I expect to see is a lot of talk about climate change. The CLCPA came with this, is the New York State Climate Action Council. They released their report a couple weeks ago, sort of outlining some of the priorities that they think the state legislature should take up. So the Climate Action Council was this group put together by the previous governor, Andrew Cuomo, to sort of tackle the big climate change issue. And they were put together to come out with a number of recommendations to the legislature. Then the legislature would then take up through a variety of different bills and what that would look like. Basically, the report outlines, a way for the state to move away from natural gas in about 50 years or so, and sort of become more reliant on, solar, electric, power, hydropower, things like that, wind and things. So to try to move towards green energy. And what does that mean for the restaurant industry? Obviously, we need gas. We rely on gas in all of our restaurants. We rely on gas to sort of operate. Frankly, the grid in New York is not up to snuff when it comes to the ability to handle if everybody would have moved to electric. So that's the big takeaway for our industry, is what the future of natural gas looks like. Now, none of this is happening overnight. None of this is going to be happening, in the next 10 years, I would say, for existing restaurants. What we may see is a move for new builds, new restaurants to have more difficulty in sort of getting natural gas hookups as buildings are being forced to move away from natural gas for their actual So if you're, let's say, you're a restaurant, and again, this sort of recommendation passes, we might see some legislation this year that says like a phase out period, in 5 years or so for new builds, none can be natural gas. One of the things that we're looking at is sort of getting an exemption for commercial kitchens. New York City, for example, has a policy in place right now that all new builds can actually use natural gas, except if you're putting in a kitchen, then kitchens can have natural gas for commercial kitchens. Obviously, residential is different. So I think we'd see residential happen first. So you could see a residential ban on natural gas come first, and then moving on to the commercial after that. Again, none of this is happening overnight, but I would say that we could see legislation this year that does say, look, in 10, 15, 20 years from now, there needs to be a move away from natural gas, and people need to move towards more electric when they're in their commercial kitchens. Obviously, something that we're concerned about, something that we've voiced our opposition to in the past. We'll continue to do so. But again, something else to just keep an eye on. Some other issues that we may see. I put them on here. Extended producer responsibility. What that is basically it's a recycling, and this is only going to be for kind of big chains, but like a recycling bill that would make it so these folks have to use certain materials in their packaging. We've already seen some of that. This would kind of continue along that end, and you could definitely see that be a topic of conversation, forcing them to sort of rethink what materials they're using in their packaging, mainly in bags and things like that, and with their branding, and move more towards green friendly materials, and then expanded maybe mandated recycling. We see some big operations in the state, grocery stores, hotels, some huge like banquet halls and stuff like that have to take more responsibility in terms of what they're recycling, where they're putting, what they recycle, how they recycle, food waste, things like that. Wouldn't be surprised if they continue to start to expand that mandated recycling measure. So you may see some other restaurants, some other hotels get included in that. Again, there's always exemptions for this. There's always waivers that folks can get, but something else for us to keep an eye on that we're monitoring and certainly have some concerns about. Again, much more from a practical standpoint, where if you're requiring these folks to recycle, is there actual infrastructure in place for them to actually do the recycling? Are there plants available? Are there trucks? Without costing these restaurants or hotels a fortune. Is there a way to is making sure that we have the infrastructure in place first before these requirements come down to ensure that we're not forcing you folks to have a burden that just becomes unbearable. So those are some of the environmental issues that we're sort of monitoring for 2023. Excuse me one second here. My throat was getting a little dry. And the last thing I'll say sort of is that we're looking for is sort of state liquor authority reform. This has been something that the governor has tasked a group to put forth a number of recommendations, and that our Melissa Fleischut, President CEO of the Restaurant Association, sat on said board, and that report should be out in sometime in the spring. They're doing an economic study along with it. So in conjunction with that report, or even before that report, we could see some changes, fundamental changes to the SLA, right? We may see changes to the 500-foot rule and the 200-foot rule. These rules are sort of outdated. Basically, for those who aren't aware, you can't open a restaurant with a liquor license, or any place can have a liquor license within 500 feet of 500 feet of a place of worship, 200 feet by a school. I think it's either one or the other. I'd have to double check which one, but there's a move to sort of eliminate those. Again, I think those are sort of from a bygone era. I don't think there's a concern necessarily of having a bar too close to a school or a bar too close to a place of worship anymore. Again, much more. We're seeing many of these places who apply, many of these establishments that apply for these liquor licenses get approval eventually. A lot of times these schools and these places of worship, they don't actually care, and so they sign waivers and stuff like that. But it becomes this huge sort of red tape issue that we're looking to sort of hopefully do away with. The other idea that's sort of popping up is the idea of co-op buying. Could a group of restaurants come together and buy from liquor wholesalers to bring down costs? Or if you're a restaurant that has multiple liquor licenses, could you then buy and then distribute to those restaurants as you see fit? Not really allowed right now. Could be something that would be allowed and would be able to save restaurants and these on-premise license holders some money as we move forward. Would that be a way to sort of help mitigate against the fact that there's two liquor wholesalers in the state of New York? You have to go to one. You can't. There's no other option. And they don't compete against one another for So again, we're up against it in that regard. So how do you combat that? Maybe co-op buying is one of the things. Delivery fees. I don't think I need to tell folks how much in these liquor wholesalers charge in delivery fees. It was supposed to be a gas fee once upon a time in the early 2000s when it was allowed by the liquor authority. They basically said, "Hey, you guys can charge an extra dollar." For deliveries because gas is so high. This has morphed into these liquor wholesalers charging $30, $35 per delivery. Frankly, that's outrageous. That there's no need for that, and so we're looking to work on getting that reformed and say, look, this is once a dollar gas fee. If you guys want to charge a dollar, sure. A dollar delivery fee, $2 delivery fee for this stuff. But come on, you can't be charging $35. Like you're making money now. Like that's the revenue generation. You're not, this has nothing to do with, the fact that you have to deliver. And especially, in areas where there's multiple restaurants on the same block, every restaurant having to pay a $35 delivery fee when one truck goes and hits 5 different restaurants is sort of ridiculous. So looking to put a cap on those, similar to the cap we got on split case fees, although currently that's being held up by litigation, sort of think it's going to happen. So we were pushing for a long time for this, and it got passed and approved by the SLA. Again, being held up by the courts right now, but basically, it puts a cap on how much these liquor wholesalers can charge when you split a case. Again, very very rarely do restaurants order a full case of one type of liquor, and again, you split it between multiple types. These wholesalers again were charging pretty astronomical fees for that. And we're looking to sort of put a cap on that. We got a cap passed at about $7 as the most that they could put on for a split case fee. But again, currently not in place because the courts are holding it up. Should get a decision on that in the relatively near term. And then we can go from there about what that looks like. But these are just a few of what the many sort of state liquor authority reform that we'll be pushing for, but also we'll see like other folks as well. There's a movement afoot to sort of open up the hours that liquor stores can sort of sell. I don't think Restaurant Association has any issue with that. Sort of more competition the better when it comes to, I think in that regard. I don't think that really cut into each other's business too much. And then we alcohol to go, looking to get some of the sort of fine tuning of that done too. Cocktails, with this movement that there are a lot of people making cocktails in cans. I'm sure you guys have all seen it. There's commercials for all this stuff all the time. Currently under the alcohol to go rule, that if you were to sell like that product where you have a cocktail in a can, you wouldn't be able to sell it in the can itself. You'd have to transfer that to another vessel and then have a top and a seal on that vessel. That sort of doesn't make any sense at all. Again, there's no prohibition on the sale of it, but again, you can't be sold in the original container. Again, that sort of doesn't make any sense. So looking to get that changed with the SLA. And a few other things to sort of hopefully modernize their system, modernizing their license renewals, try to speed the process up. Frankly, it takes way too long to get a liquor license. I think right now, if you apply for a liquor license, it takes you about 6 months. That's kind of outrageous. So looking to get that done too. Those are the three sort of big pillars I have here. And the next slide, I think, is just questions. Before we get to some questions here, just a couple other, I guess, issues that I'll make mention of that could happen in 2023. The first one is sort of cannabis, and I say that just because there needs to be sort of clarity on sort of a number of things surrounding marijuana. And as these sort of recreational retail licenses started getting up and running, I mean, we've already seen the first one open in New York City. We'll see a few more open here in the not too distant future. Again, just how that intersects with alcohol and things like that. Like if there's no field test for marijuana. Right. If somebody is high, there's no, you can't they get pulled over. So the same thing as alcohol. But what happens if somebody comes in and has a drink at your establishment, but is high, and then they wrap their car around a telephone pole, they find out they've been drinking at your establishment, they come back and ask you, again, there's a lot of intersection that needs to be sort of cleared up in that area. So working to get clarity on that end of things. And one of the other issues that I'm sort of working on is the expansion of sort of mobile gaming and allowing restaurants and bars, if they choose to, obviously wouldn't be a mandate, but if they choose to have some sort of kiosk available to take sports bets. and the relationship between restaurants and opening up the relationship between restaurants, sports bars, and these gaming companies that would come in, put a kiosk in, pay you for that, handle all the bets, but also pay you some money to that you're hosting this at your bar. Again, allowing bars to run specials and things like that in conjunction with the sports betting. Again, something that I think we've seen is pretty successful in other states. Ohio just opened up these kiosks, or the ability for these kiosks, and it has made some meaningful, revenue for their sort of certain type of establishment. Again, this is one of these sports bars and the ilk that may be able to take advantage of something like this. But again, they've seen sort of a meaningful increase in revenue in that space. So again, looking to open up. That side of things. So those are two of those sort of miscellaneous issues here that I think we should keep an eye on. And again, we'll get more information we'll get more details on a lot of these things, and also other proposals that we'll see here as we move along. So I would encourage folks, if you want to be on our mailing list, we send out updates pretty regularly. If you don't get them, email me. My email's on the screen right now. I'll add you to the mailing list, making sure you're getting all our updates and things like that, to ensure that you're up to date on this stuff. We'll be sending out updates pretty regularly now that the legislature's back in session. Yeah, and I see it was a question, I think, in the chat here. Will delivery fee reform take place for all vendor types to restaurants, not just liquor vendors? What anybody's specific in terms of maybe what type of other vendors? I mean, I'm more familiar with the liquor vendors, and obviously there's a delivery fee conversation surrounding sort of delivery to consumer and third parties with the Uber Eats and the DoorDashes and things like that. That I expect to come back up again, is putting a fee cap in place for those folks. I guess what other fees are you seeing in the delivery space that maybe we can work on? It's certainly something that we can talk about.
So I threw that one out there because my other hat that I wear is with a nonprofit that has a small cafe. And
Okay.
So we have various food vendors. I'll give examples. Cisco is one of the big food vendors and restaurant vendors in the area. And, they tend to charge a $10+ delivery fee, even when they're delivering to 10
Yeah.
other restaurants in the same area.
Yeah, no, it's something we can certainly look at. I sort of was unfamiliar with that delivery fee, but yeah, sort of in that ilk, we can certainly examine all sort of delivery fees. I think that is something that is pertinent and something that we can look into. Yeah, again, $10 is pretty high, especially when you're getting multiple orders and things like that a week, I'm sure. So yeah, would be happy to sort of add that to the list of things. So thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Great. I'll bring you some examples.
Yeah, Alan, great question. And Alan, Happy New Year. Great to see you. Uh, but yeah, there is a chance that one of the SLA reforms I forgot to mention on there, but one of the things that's also being discussed is that the ability for restaurants to purchase liquor from a liquor store. Again, I think it would be capped at a certain amount. I think it would be, sort of say like, look, you can buy X amount here, but then, you can't, as long as the liquor authority, as long as the liquor store and you guys are keeping records of it. Cause again, the big thing for the SLA is they want to know what you have and how much you have of it. But again, as long as those records are in place, it should be fine. And again, that I expect that to be one of the things in that sort of SLA reform thing that we should be able to get done. Liquor stores obviously don't mind. We're not really up against it with anybody. The wholesalers have raised sort of token opposition to that idea when it came up, but again, they get their money regardless. So I don't know what exactly their issue is there. But so again, that's something that we'll certainly be talking about, and I think something that we should be able to get done. Again, was allow folks to purchase directly from liquor stores. There will be a sort of cap on it though. You won't be able to buy all of your probably liquor, but again, you would be able to. In an example, if you run out of something and you need to go get a couple bottles, you'd be hopefully permitted to do that if we can get that changed. Any other questions? I know I just gave you guys probably a whole bunch of information in a very short period of time. If questions come about and you guys want to if you have anything else, just my emails. It's the best way to reach me, frankly. My email's on the screen. Feel free to shoot me a note. Say ask for specific updates if you want to, or if you just want to be included on the mailing list if you're not already, or if you want to ask a question about anything. I'm always here to help, and always here to assist. We have another question in here. Any DOH changes? I don't anticipate much change to the Department of Health, mainly because they don't ever change. Um, they frankly, like, we haven't had an update to the health code in quite a while, and I don't necessarily anticipate this something coming. I guess the DOH sort of change to look out for is, again, as we sort of move forward. COVID pay is still a thing, and we've us in the business community. We're working with a bunch of other business groups to try to get that to be eliminated and go away. Frankly, I think that's going to be here for at least a few more months, and sort of working with the Department of Health on that end of things. But other than that, like, I don't necessarily anticipate a ton of changes from the DOH on that. I don't, again, I wouldn't anticipate anything coming from that end of things. I'm trying to think of other DOH issues. I don't think anybody's getting letter grading anytime soon or anything like that. So, yeah, I don't anticipate much happening with the Department of Health, mainly because, again, most of the time, not a whole lot happens with the Department of Health. Going through other agencies in my head to try to see if there's anything I missed. Will any of these changes affect temp/slash day-to-day workers? I would guess I would need some sort of clarification. Exactly what changes do you mean? I mean, I don't think, there I wouldn't imagine any of these changes being made that would affect that. I mean, things would probably stay the status quo in regards to most of that stuff. Again, the wage changes, if those were to happen, again, we've already seen the wage increase for this year, so we're not going to have additional wage increase this year. But you'll have to raise those wages for sure. But other than that, I don't think there's much that I think would affect temporary or day to day workers too much. But if you have a specific question in regards to those changes, I'm all ears. It seems I answered that. Anything else anybody has? Again, if anything comes to the state of the state today, we'll be putting out an update. So I'll be watching that here as it gets started. Oh, in about an hour and a half. Transparency regulations. Yes. Yeah. Transparency regulations will affect the industry. That's a great question, Michael. Yeah. So that was a bill that was passed last year. It's not going to take effect, I don't believe, until late summer. But yeah, there will be a rule in place that will mandate, employers, when you post jobs, to post the wage to go along with it, a wage range, which is actually a weird, tough thing to say. Wage range when you are posting a job. So if you post a job on any sort of website or anything like that, you will have to post the salary range if it's a salary position, or the wage per hour range if it's a per hour position. You will have to post that. Again, that'll take effect towards I think the middle of the year. Every industry has to do it. It's not just the restaurant industry. We sort of voiced our opposition against it. There was the rule in New York City. It was sort of tough for us to fight against with that many folks that were sort of pushing for it. But again, that will be a rule in place, and we'll update you guys exactly when that has to be done. So again, I think it was 180 days after it was signed. It was just signed, so I think it's probably the middle part of next year.
And just to add on that, Michael Sciatti with Barclay Damon did a seminar on the wage transparency changes either last month or in November. So I'll send that video link to everybody along with this video link.
Oh yeah, Lisa, 9/17/23, perfect. Yeah, I knew it was something like that point, but thanks, Lisa, appreciate that. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's any other laws. I mean, if you have you will gonna have at some point next year. Speaking of DOH, I guess there was a law that was passed. You will have to put on your menu allergen language, basically saying if you have a food allergy, please let us know. You will have to put that on your menu. But again, that will happen, sometime towards the middle of next year. And I know a lot of folks kind of already do that anyways. So. Anything else? All right. Well, again, my email was on the screen. Oh, we have one more question. Thank you, Michael. Again, if anybody has any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always trying to make myself available. Happy to sort of answer anything you guys may have, or if you want to double check if you're doing right on the regulation side of things and you're not opening yourself up to. I will say, I'm surprised I haven't said it so far because it's the thing I say most every day. I am not a lawyer. I want to make that perfectly clear. Nothing I've said today can be construed as legal advice. I'm just a lobbyist. That's sort of it. But again, not a lawyer, so nothing. Please don't construe anything I said as legal advice. If you ask with questions, I'll give you my particular take on it. And then if it does get into an area that we probably need more legal help, we have a number of lawyers that we work with all over the state who can provide that advice for you. Yeah, if you're not a member of the restaurant association, join. It's great. Um, we do weekly phone calls and things like that. We do webinars. I'm doing a webinar for the association on Thursday. So again, if you haven't joined the restaurant association, please do. Love talking to you folks. And again, any questions, feel free to reach out.
All right, thank you, everybody. We will share the link to the recording with you later on. I'll include that link for the wage transparency seminar we did also. You can visit chemungchamber.org to register for upcoming webinars or find recordings of previous webinars. For anyone interested in chamber membership, please contact the chamber at info@chemungchamber.org or call 607-734-5137. Many thanks to Kevin Dugan with the New York State Restaurant Association and to everyone for joining us today. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.